everyone, Pam Gregory, astrologer. I wanted to talk about something different with you today. I happen to be listening to a really inspiring lecture presentation from a wonderful American astrologer called Kelly Hunter, and I'll put her website below. And much of the information I'm sharing with you today came from Kelly's research. Some of it, quite a lot of it, I already knew. Some of it was new to me, and I really felt enormously inspired by it, and I felt it should get out to as many people as possible. So I'm honouring and crediting Kelly for this research. So she's the expert on many of these orbiting bodies that I'm about to talk about. Now, really what this is about new planetary archetypes. Now, each planet in astrology, as many of you will know, has an archetype. You know, if we think of the archetype of Mars, it's aggression and assertion. In myth, Mars was god of war. And we can feel that in people who have a very strong Mars. They have a strong physicality, they've got to be busy, they may be sporty or even athletic. We can feel that strong physical, strong constitution, strong energy in them. If someone has a very strong Uranus, that's a very different archetype. That's to do with the alternative, it's to do with originality, brilliance. There's often quite a hyperactive mind in there, drawn to the alternative. It's a very different quality of energy. So now I'm going to be talking about a couple of planets I've mentioned before, but more new ones as well that I hope will interest you. Okay, these planets orbit in what is called the Kuiper Belt. Kuiper, the Kuiper Belt, which is way out in space beyond the orbit of Neptune and even some of them beyond the orbit of Pluto. So a long way out in our cosmos. And they have very slow orbits in general, extremely slow orbits, or slower than the orbit of Pluto. Now, first of all, I'll talk about, for instance, Eris, by the way. Eris is one of those planets. It's a dwarf planet that orbits in that Kuiper Belt. Now, Eris was discovered, in fact, all of these that I'm going to be talking about today were discovered round about 2000, early 2000s. And it takes some time for astrologers to really understand the symbolism, partly because they move so slowly, they don't make a lot of aspects with other planets, so it takes us time, but you also need to dig into the myths connected to them and make sure by testing them in people's charts that they are resonating accurately to what we feel the symbolism is. Eris I talk about a lot in my work now, most astrologers do. The dwarf planet that is the goddess of discord and chaos. She brings things to a tipping point to challenge the status quo. And she's very much doing that with this square to Pluto. Pluto in Capricorn, this top-down authority and control. So I've mentioned many times, we've seen that in Hong Kong, we're seeing it in the US right now. But Eris essentially she was the sister of Mars in myth, so she's a female warrior. She's a warrior for truth. She's also a female awakener. So very strong energy, and I'm going to come back to Eris in a little while. Another planet I wrote about in my last book, How to Co-Create Using the Secret Language of the Universe, is Haumea. Haumea is also a dwarf planet out in that Kuiper Belt, orbit of 285 years. And in myth, she is very associated with the Hawaiian goddess of fertility. And indeed, it's even said that Haumea actually created the islands of Hawaii. She's the empress in the tarot. She has this incredible fertility. In fact, she's even egg-shaped, which is almost funny considering her symbolism. But she is fertile to the point that she could birth babies from different parts of her body, not just the normal part. And she has very strong female creational and regenerative energy. So for instance, when she was very old, she was able to regenerate herself back to being a young maiden. Would that we all had that. She also had this incredible close connection to nature. So when the land was laid waste by poor agricultural practices or toxicity, she had a magic stick called a makalai, and she could just summon seafood and wild food so that people would never go hungry. She could just magically bring it from nowhere and invent food. So she has a Merlin-like quality, and she very much is linked to the kind of wild and instinctive side of nature, quite shamanic in a way. And she is totally connected to nature being sacred, all beings being sacred, and a divine intelligence that operates in nature. She sees everything that is physical, whether it's the earth, whether it's our physical bodies, as simply being a mirror of that relationship with nature. So it's a very primordial relationship. And she very much believes that that everything in life is vibrating energy. And in fact, this is linked to the astronomers in Hawaii many, many years ago, also very much you're going way back to the Vedas with this philosophy as well, that all of life was vibrating energy. And from that vibrating energy cascades matter and manifestation, which of course is the whole quantum model, which I'll come back to later in this piece. So she had a magical quality, a Merlin-like quality, a shamanic quality, and powerful female creational energy. Then Sedna. Sedna I've spoken about before, a huge orbit of 10,500 years. And her orbit goes way out in the kind of icy wastes of the cosmos. At times she's 84 billion miles from the sun. So it's quite extraordinary, Sedna. And the real expert on Sedna, or one of the real experts, is a New Zealand astrologer called Alan Clay. Clay, so I direct you to him on any questions on Sedna. But she essentially is an Inuit sea goddess. She was very beautiful in myth, and she was persuaded to marry her husband. In some myths it's a dog, in other myths it's what's called a fulmar, Fulmar, that's like a huge albatross bird. But either way, her husband promised her a life of comfort and abundance, but that wasn't how it worked out. It was a life of hunger and barrenness. So she begged her father to come and rescue her, and her father arrived in the boat, and they set off together, but they started to be attacked by these huge birds, these fulmars. And in order to give them cover from the birds, Sedna kind of blew up this storm at sea, but it became so wild that Sedna's father feared for his life, so he threw Sedna out of the boat, and she was desperately trying to cling on to climb back in the boat, but he chopped her fingers off. So her fingers just floated down into the ocean, but they transmuted and transformed into these beautiful sea creatures, these seals and walruses. So out of tragedy and extreme earth events, again, you have this female creational energy happening that's so powerful. So she is very connected to major earth events, particularly floods and tsunamis, that kind of thing, but immensely powerful. Again, to switch around tragedy to turn it into something quite beautiful. And again, this very, very close connection to nature. Another beautiful, I believe has been registered as a dwarf planet, is a planet called Salacia. I will put all these names at the bottom as well, so you know how to spell them. So I'm not deluged with people say, how do you spell it? And then you can start to do your own research on these. But in myth, again, she was discovered around the same time. And in myth, she was the wife of Neptune. And she is mermaid energy. But not just that, she's the queen of mermaids in the myth. And she has a kind of iridescent, shape-shifting, sparkly energy that causes the sunlight to glitter on that shifting surface of the sea. It's just absolutely ethereal and beautiful. So she is just very fluid and very beautiful. It's almost, she has the qualities of of Neptune, she's almost hard to get a hold of. And there's a seduction part of her too. The word Salacious comes from Salacia too. So, and again, this is very much Kelly Hunter's research as well. So again, credit and honour Kelly in this. Last planet I'd like to talk about here, and by the way, there are others, there are several others that Kelly has researched, and I just felt it was too much to put all in one video, but I'll continue researching these and others as well. And there are many, many more to be discovered out there. But just to emphasize something I've said in previous videos, that new archetypes only come into our consciousness when our consciousness is ready to receive them. Something I really want to emphasize there. Actually, just one, I'm going to talk about two others. Another I want to mention is a dwarf planet called, it's spelt MakeMake, all one word, but I understand it's pronounced MakeMake. And MakeMake in myth is a male creational energy linked to the great sea spirit of Easter Island. And as some of you may know in your history, back in the 19th century, Easter Island was really laid waste through the slave trade, through foreigners introducing disease to the islanders. And so MakeMake is very linked to pandemics and disease. But because by 1886, on Easter Island, there were literally only 111 people left on the island with no fresh water supply, and again, agriculture that had just been abandoned. But in the myth, MakeMake, as the great sea spirit, was able to work with the agriculture on the island and produce food again, so the population could grow and thrive. And what's very interesting, just last week I was listening to a wonderful lady called Debbie Solaris, who is a galactic historian, and she happened to say that those huge stone carved heads that I think we've all seen photographs of that stare out to the sea and don't look at all human. Debbie Solaris said that they were carved in homage to the Arcturians that used to visit Easter Island. So here we get another glimpse of the galactic coming in. The final one I want to mention, and this really electrified me, is a wonderful, I believe this is a dwarf planet too. Some of them haven't been officially named dwarf planets, but they're all in this Kuiper Belt, in the same area of space. It's called Wawa, Quaoar, far too many vowels in it. I understand that's pronounced Wawa. And Wawa got its name from the ancient the primordial creative force in nature that the North American Indians gave it. So it's very linked to indigenous tribes, and also not just North Americans, but it's also linked to Aboriginal dream time, to walking the song lines. Just magical. And in Wawa, the myth is that through song and dance, you weave the world into being. You weave the world into being through getting to very high levels of frequency, through joy in your song and dance. You take that high level vibration and collapse it again into manna and manifestation in the world. So it's just a beautiful, beautiful myth. And again, so aligned to quantum physics, so aligned to that. Now with Wawa too, very like many of the other myths, she believed that all beings were sacred, that there was a divine intelligence operating in nature. And again, there's this theme which comes up in several of them, Haumea, land laid waste, MakeMake, pandemics and land laid waste, many tragedies in nature or abuse of nature in some way. There's almost like a price must be paid. But then, all of them really, and Wawa very strongly speaks of this evolutionary jump in consciousness, this quantum jump in consciousness that comes after that, but very related to this high level vibration. So this I mean, I've written in both my books, and particularly actually in the first one, How to Co-Create Using the Secret Language of the Universe, looked at how I felt astrology, because what my real obsession is, how do we create reality? How is reality formed, and how does astrology fit into that? And in my first book, I was really exploring that as one of the main themes, that how astrology not only fits into the ancient Greek philosophy, if you look at philosophy of Plato, how he believed, that there was this world of ideas that then collapsed into something more tangible, or whether you look at the quantum physics model, the work of David Bohm in his long Conversations into the Night with Krishnamurti, that still you can see online, I think, even though he's died now, that there's we are creating from the ether, we are creating from nothing, we're creating from the wave in quantum soup through observation and intention to collapse that wave into the particle, into matter and manifestation. So it so closely fits with the quantum model. And these dwarf planets do that even more so, I think, because they're a finer energy. They're a more magical energy, if you like. And I mean, Haumea very much believed, and I don't know if I mentioned this, that all of land, nature, our physical bodies are simply a mirror of our relationship with nature. So there are many common threads in these myths. And as I say, they're more dwarf planets that Kelly has researched, but they're commonalities of this incredibly divine, magical, intertwined connection and understanding of nature, that we're not separate, we don't dominate, we are part of nature completely. But the ability to shapeshift and get these quantum leaps in our consciousness, really special. Now, what is important, I think, and these archetypes don't just come into our consciousness when we're ready for them, but they often form strong geometry between them, because that's obviously a huge part of astrology. It's very interesting that at the moment, remember these all move very slowly, that Salacia at 4 degrees of Aries is exactly opposing MakeMake at 4 degrees of Libra, and they're both squaring Wawa at 4 degrees of Capricorn. By the way, 4 degrees of Capricorn is where we had the solar eclipse, and a very powerful one in December last year. So this is an exact T-square. So there's something about this evolutionary quantum jump in consciousness that's very prominent in the geometry and in the archetypes right now. Equally, there's another T-square operating between Haumea at 26 of Libra, squaring Pluto at 24 of Capricorn, which is exactly squaring Eris at 24 of Aries. Now we know, because I've talked about it and spoken about it and written about it many times, that Eris in that square to Pluto, which is long running till late 2021, is about this deconstruction of the old order, and the frustration or the protest that people are making is they are accelerating that deconstruction of the old order, the collapse of the old systems. And yet on the other part of the T-square, Homeo is absolutely talking about this regeneration of nature and regeneration of consciousness. So this is so promising. I got so excited when I was listening to Kelly's talk. I think the other thing I want to say in this too is that we know from a science point of view that our whole solar system is spinning out of this protective area called the magnetic cloud. Therefore, our Earth is receiving completely unfamiliar galactic and cosmic energy, which we've never experienced before. So that is pouring onto the Earth plane, and a lot more, huge amount more photonic light. It's called photonic energy, because it's created from light, and light carries information. And this is upgrading our DNA. We don't even have to do anything. It just upgrades our DNA in an evolutionary way. But what is very interesting as well is so many very sensitive and psychic people are really seeing this as a cosmic wave of love coming. I was just reading another post today from a good friend, a cosmic wave of love coming in for us, which again is part of this evolutionary jump and these connections to these new, dare I call them 5D archetypes, which seem so fine, which seem so special and magical for us. So I think if we can become inspired by those rather than what's happening in very dense contracted 3D reality, we start to get this vast expansion, this feeling of truly being a galactic citizen as we reach out further into the universe. And, you know, I'd mentioned before this idea of the Columbus moment, that when Columbus set sail, he didn't actually think he'd hit another piece of land, because that wasn't his reality, that wasn't the world as he knew it. And yet, obviously, he discovered America, and that just blew up his whole vision of how the world was, how big the world was. We are equally going through an evolutionary Columbus moment. There's this jump in understanding our place in the cosmos and our ability and power to manifest in the cosmos. Using energy, using intention, this understanding of frequency and vibration will become much, much clearer and stronger as we move through the coming months and years. So really use that, and where you put your energy is where you put your focus and your attention. So can we give focus and energy and attention to these archetypes that are so beautiful, rather than what is happening in a much more turbulent and challenging 3D world? And because if we can all do that, we will help the shift in the collective. So I hope that's been helpful for you. I will also put the broad dates when these orbiting bodies were travelling through various signs. Remember, they move very slowly. I can't give you exact degrees. I mean, remember, this is very new, really, for astrology. So I can at least give you an idea of the signs. And again, I credit Kelly Hunter, because that came from her work and her. So I haven't done the work on that. She has. And just want to thank you for listening, and I hope this has been new and interesting information for you. Blessings to you all. Bye for now.